Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another show of Big Hairy News, another episode of Big Hairy News. So good to be back with you. Good evening, Chewy.
What's up? What's crack-a-lackin'?
I was about to say, kid of the 90s. What's that? That everyone remembers that
What's
series.
that?
I don't know. We could get straight into it by saying sad news if you're a kid of the 90s, though, with old Matthew Perry over the weekend. We'll talk about that a little bit shortly, but yes, other things. How are you, man? Haven't really seen you up until 45 seconds ago.
Yes, it's been a busy day. I picked up something today.
Yeah.
I picked up car keys.
Mm.
I picked up car keys. So some of the more observant regular listeners might have noticed that I have a singular focus around EVs. And that is a side effect of actually trying to hunt one down that I wanted for the last 8 months. So yes, picked it up today.
Very cool. How exciting!
It's pretty exciting. Like
Yeah.
I've never had a car of my own,
Ooh.
and I guess I've been very, very focused on that and my trip to the States in January. So it's a good feeling spaffing 2 years worth of savings up against a wall. It's all gone. Now.
Did you got that from whereabouts in the country?
So I got that from a Hyundai dealership in Ashburton.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. Oh, for some reason I was thinking Nelson, or there was one in the North Island. So did you go and pick it up, or did they send it down to you?
No, they put it on a transporter Friday last week and sent it down to me.
Very exciting. So did you pick it up from the Hyundai dealership in Dunedin?
Yes.
Was it straight to you?
Yeah. Because you'll know on my street that you'd have no chance of unloading a car transporter.
I'm very excited for you, bro. Well done. You've worked hard for that. The next question is, how are you going to get power to it?
My garage is unelectrified at the moment, so I'm currently in the process of digging a horrible trench.
Okay.
That has to apparently, by regulations, be 600 millimeter deep. And I could pay $1,000 to have someone else do it. But as I mentioned, I have no money anymore. So I've got a pickaxe and I'm working on it at the moment.
That's awesome, bro. If you ever want to come and park it in a garage to charge it up for a while, you bring it around to my place. I'll only charge you like an hour's fun in it for you to park it here and charge it up.
It's very generous, and I'm also very suspicious of the indeterminate fun that you've described.
Okay. Fair enough. No, that's fair enough. Oh, well done. Very exciting. Very exciting. I was also going to say, and I know I'm going to spam this for a wee while, but we are looking for our lovely, lovely listeners and viewers' support in the New Zealand Podcast Awards this year. You guys can actually get involved by heading to the Podcast Award website and voting for the listener podcast of the year. I'm putting links and stuff into the chat right now. I know I've messed it up a couple of times and I put words together and it didn't quite work, but those links will now all work, that you can head to the Podcast Award website, to the nominate page, nominate us, because it's a listener award. When they ask for a link, best to put up one of the audio links. So I've given you the option for the Apple Podcast link. You can put that in there and you can nominate us. And I will bang on a little bit about this over the next couple of weeks, because
we will beat that horse.
You may not be aware of this, but we're a little show. And we just do this ourselves in our own time. And, some lovely people are on our Patreon and lovely people buy merch every now and again. But generally, we're up against places like NZME and like MediaWorks and RNZ. We'll be up against RNZ for this because we're in the news commentary segment. You guys got us to number 1 in the charts. And I'm sure if you wanted to be involved and support us in this way, you could get us somewhere into the listener awards as well. So the podcast is the website is nzpodcastawards.com if you're listening to this, /nominate, or just go to nzpodcasts.com and there's a link there to nominate page. And if you're listening to this in the audio podcast, then you already have the audio link because you're listening to us in the audio podcast. So that would be good. Gareth asked, can you vote multiple times? I don't think so. I wouldn't think so, because I think once you've voted, because they ask for your email address and that sort of stuff. And yes, I am gonna beat this horse a little bit. And if you want to pass the word around, and you know people who support us in other areas and like to listen to us, keep on passing us around and get as many votes in there for us as you can. Anywho, Chewy, my weekend was a little bit different than yours. You may remember an episode last week, we talked a little bit about the word norovirus being in my house.
Oh, yes. How's that going?
It was okay, but I think I might have... Apparently with norovirus, some people can get it in less serious events. So on Friday, I was actually here in the studio working, and I started to feel quite lethargic, and my brain stopped working. And I just went, I think I'm done with work for the day. Shut everything down. It was probably early afternoon, went upstairs, and my limbs started to get heavy, like achy, like a bad flu. Long story short, I had an achy sort of... I wasn't really sick, but like an achy, chilled out, do nothing weekend. However, the good side of that was I saw, and Chewy, if you haven't seen this, I'm sure you'll be aware of it. I watched a mini-series over the weekend, a 7-part mini-series, an Australian series.
Oh, yes, I know that well.
Gallipoli.
Yep.
And it was spectacular.
Yeah, it's very, very good.
2015, I think it came out, 2015. It's on Netflix right now. This is the Apple TV, so I don't know if it's available on Apple TV in New Zealand, but it is definitely available on Netflix. Taught me things. Like, for some reason, you always hear about Gallipoli, and you always hear about the storming of Gallipoli and going up, you don't never really think too much, or maybe it's just that I've missed it, how long it actually was, how long they were there for, and how long they didn't succeed for. That was something that hit me. And also, it's very, very graphic, including the time where they had a bit of an amnesty and they went out to pick up the bodies of the deceased soldiers from both sides. Very, very graphic. Very, very graphic. So be aware if you're of your if you're of a more timid disposition, probably the wrong word, sensitive disposition. But yeah, it's on Netflix right now, Gallipoli 7-part series. I watched the whole thing over the weekend because I basically spent the whole weekend sitting in my big chair just chilling out. So there you go.
You're right. It did come out in 2015. I was watching it basically as it traveled Europe, and I went to Gallipoli in 2015. So that'd be right there.
Yeah, and it was particular. I mean, it's a little bit like when Saving Private Ryan came out. People said that movie, even though it was incredibly violent, it was accurate violence. You know, it wasn't graphic violence. You hear graphic violence kind of means, unneeded, but it was accurate. And like, I can remember there's a couple of points in this program, this miniseries, like when the guys are walking through the trenches and they look down and there's like just the jawbone with teeth in it of someone left over in the trench that they're walking on. The actual trenches have got bones and stuff in them, and skeletal remains and that kind of stuff all over the place.
I've seen that. Yeah. I have a little box here from just exploring the trenches, and I rubbed my hand across the dirt, and just metal fragments.
Wow.
Shrapnel.
Wow.
And so I have some of those in a box here somewhere.
Wow. Yeah. So anyway, that was my weekend. It was spent being very do nothing but watching a very good series, which is what we often like to bring to. The other thing, of course, especially if you're probably of our generation, Chewy. I mean, you're a few years younger than me, but Friends, and if you like comedy, Friends was a huge part of a lot of our lives. And very sad news about Matthew Perry passing away. Statement sort of released, not from Lisa Kudrow, but someone close to Lisa Kudrow, was saying she was baffled. She's quoted as being saying she was baffled of his death because he was closer than ever to his folks. He was actively engaged in his sobriety. She is baffled on what caused his death. So, who knows? Passing away tragically, if you put your body through those sorts of things, as he did for a long time to do with alcohol and drugs, who knows what damage he did to his heart? Who knows if he slipped off the wagon or not? I don't know. But just such sad news about Matthew Perry. I don't know about you, Chewy, but my group of friends we all kind of had our characters, we were which one of the friends are you sort of thing. It was my ilk. I mean, like, most of he's a bit older, because I think Jennifer Aniston and those guys are about 50. So when I was watching that screen, I was watching people who were basically my age. And I'm sure, Chewy, you were probably watching those screens as well, and they were just people who were sort of 3 or 4 or 5 years older than you, so you could relate to them. It's just terribly sad and tragic news, and I hate that whole, well, at least he's at rest now. I'm like, no. Like, I remember one of those things about watching that Gallipoli show, the generals were saying to one another, they will be remembered, and I just thought, oh, well, fuck, I bet you the family of these guys who died there and then would rather they weren't being remembered and that they were actually sitting down for breakfast. So, the whole, at least he's finally at rest thing, it's like, no, I think people who know and love him and stuff would rather have him there having a coffee the next day than at least he's at peace. So it's just a horrible time. It's hard and horrible.
I was never a massive fan of Friends, but I tell you what, I really did enjoy him on, and it's a show that not many people have seen here. It never made it to broadcast TV here, but he was in a, it was kind of like a, what would you call it? A dramedy. Wasn't quite a comedy, wasn't quite a drama, called Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Okay.
It was about a like a TV show, like a sort of thing. And he is very, very good in that. And I think it often gets, because of the huge success of Friends, it actually gets overlooked what a good actor he is. Because you've got his character from Friends. He's quite capable of more depth of character and better acting than he was doing in Friends. But yeah, Free Soul, I know you are off your feet for a little while. Maybe hunt out that one, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. It's very, very good.
All right, guys. Also, though, if you're thinking about comedy and you're looking for comedy, if you happen to be a Dunedinite like us, then remember, friend of the show, Jeremy Elwood, has a show in town this Friday night. So if you want to go see Jeremy Elwood live, you should check him out in Dunedin this Friday night. Just look up Jeremy Elwood Dunedin. All details are there. The links to get tickets and stuff are there as well. I'm going to go check him out. Jeremy's a mate from a long time ago, so we're going to go check him out. If you're
been on the show loads.
If you're a Dunedinite, you should go and check him out as well. Support those who have supported us all through the time. Now, speaking of supporting us, one more bit before we head into it. Huge thanks to those people who got into BHE merch last week. All the merch was sent out and it should have been on the courier on Monday morning. So you should be seeing it within 1 to 3 working days, maybe tomorrow, maybe by Wednesday, Thursday. Bottom feeder merch and also BHN gear is up and it's for sale. People who ordered last week, we put the order in on Friday. I'll get that back today. It'll be on the courier Thursday, Friday this week, depending on how long the printer takes to get there. But bhnshop.nz if you want to support what we're doing. These bottom feeder tops only there until Thursday night, midnight. Then they go away forever. BHN merch is always going to be available when we do merch drops. So bottom feeder hoodies, bottom feeder t-shirts, and you can get them in tan. I know that kind of looks like yellow, but we've got an image of what tan actually is. There's tan actually there. You can get them in tan, which is that color, or you can get them in rust, or you can get them in black. And as the same for the t-shirts. bhnshop.nz. So Chewy, interesting show this evening actually, because it's actually has it got quite a bit to do with anti-vaxxers? No, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that's true. But we are going to look at a conversation from Q&A over the weekend where Jonathan Sumption, who is a Lord Jonathan Sumption from the UK, has been brought to New Zealand by the Free Speech Union to tell us how the mandates and stuff we did were all wrong and how we should have done it. Just listening to the conversation with Jack Tame, there is so much information he either gets wrong or almost, speaking of Gallipoli, almost in an imperial way goes, this is how we did it in the UK, this is how it must relate to New Zealand. And it's just wrong. We're going to get to that shortly, but here's a question I want to ask people. You can think about this. I'm not a free speech purist. I don't think that exists, but I always try and lean towards free speech. But when the free speech is either harmful or inaccurate, I mean, I guess a free speech purist would go, so what if it's wrong? We give them the right to say whatever they want. I guess my position is there's also a responsibility with your speech to be accurate and right. unless it's opinion based, you can have whatever opinion you want. But if you're stating things as facts, you need to be right. Now, if I'm a believer in free speech, someone can share the wrong facts, sure, but I guess that's where you start to go, what tethers should there be on free speech? What tethers should there be on, for want of a better word, platforming people, bringing people into the country and sponsoring people if they're going to actively share mis and disinformation? Sure, that's free speech, mis and disinformation, but what responsibility do we have for sharing that dis and misinformation? So there's a bigger kind of opinion-based conversation around this as well, Chewy, which I want to get to. That's just giving people a bit of a warm-up for that. And also we're going to have a look at the project from TV3, or 3, they call it now, shutting down. They got news on Thursday of last week. They were shutting down. Friday, they made a public statement. We want to play that for you tonight. And I'll give you a little bit of background information as well, because I know people who have and do work for the project as a bigger group. And there's one particular interesting comment that someone, and I won't identify the person. I've been thinking about this all day today. I won't identify who the person is. But there is one particular interesting comment that one of the, I'll say inner circle, I won't even say where they are on the show, said to me about the project before they were involved with it. And that what they said about it has kind of come to pass. So there's a bit of a teaser for you. We'll get into that shortly. But I think first where we're going to start, Chewy, is having a look at Newshub Nation over the weekend. Ben Thomas, who is, I don't know if you call him a friend of the show, but he's been on the show. He is a PR consultant, a political commentator. I think it's pretty fair to say generally pretty right-leaning, would you say, Chewy? Ben Thomas is pretty right-leaning in general?
Yeah, I'd say I'm as being on the right.
I do think he plays a pretty straight bat, though. You know, but I think ideologically he probably is pretty right. They were talking a little bit about Winston Peters's tweet last week about Jacinda Ardern and the apparent, according to Winston, the non-release of information that only just got released last week, and the tweet that Winston Peters made. Ben says some really interesting things, and I think they're worth looking at, because it's a bit like we've been talking about other people who are putting themselves in the world of the conspiracy theorist. Do you continue to pitch to that people, or do you go back to where you naturally are and risk losing those people? I guess Ben's position is kind of, Winston's going to stay there. He needs to stay there, and he's going to keep pitching to these people. So let's have a listen to that conversation from Newshub Nation, and then we'll have a chat about it.
And Winston Peters has been tweeting about the inquest into the March 15 terror attacks. I mean, what, Ben, was going on there? Can you read into why Winston Peters would be making those kinds of tweets about Jacinda Ardern in this sort of period? It's very hard to understand.
Look, many people smarter than me, more experienced than me, have tried to get inside Winston Peters' head, but. Look, every time he has gone into government so far, 1996, 2005, 2017, at the following election, his party has fallen below the 5% threshold. And in 2 cases, that's meant he's out of parliament. And if that happens again, he's out of parliament again. He keeps reinventing the kinds of arrangements that he has in government, presumably as a way of, trying to improve on the last time. Here, the worst case scenario is that he's decided he got back on the wave of the support of fringe marginal groups, conspiracy theorists, and he's decided he needs to play to that gallery throughout the term, being a handbrake is not enough. It wasn't enough in 2017, and he's actually got to be there indulging those kinds of theories. So it's a possible
political strategy looking forward to the next election?
I mean, I hope not, but that's the worst case scenario.
But what if he's...
Well, we'll keep going with this, because other guests kind of misses the point, asks what if he's correct, and he can't be correct, Winston Peters, in this, because he was saying something factually wrong. But before we get to that part, Troy, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts that Ben is like, well, he could be pitching towards these people because he wants to stay in next time. It's quite an astute observation that each time he gets into government, the next time he falls below 5%. And we've always said that Winston Peters is very good in opposition, but very ineffective in government. And maybe that's one of the reasons people vote him in for this big change, and he never does it. And so then they go elsewhere the election after. But if he can get these, for want of a better word, cookers on his side permanently, maybe that's a base he can then rely on in 3 years from now.
I mean, this is anecdotal from my side, but everyone I know that has voted or thought about voting for Winston Peters has voted for him because he's a rabble rouser. because they want a little drama in the political discourse, and they like that he rattles people's cages and that sort of thing. I think this is just a continuation of that. It's just that this is a little bit more weaponized.
So
but
you're saying it's less kind of intentional. It's more just he always stirs shit, and this is the shit he's stirring at the moment.
Yeah. I think he's, like Ben says, you can't get inside Winston's head. But what I think is pretty clear is he's seen a pathway to get back into government.
Next time,
this time.
This time.
Who knows if he's going? I don't think he'll be able to keep them, because I don't think he's built for the world that they live in.
Yeah.
But can he make the right sort of noises? Can he get the sort of concessions that these guys want out of a national-led government in a way that they're going to remember it in 3 years' time? What are they going to ask for at that stage? I just don't know. I wouldn't want to place any sort of bet. I would hope that he's gone again for the final time.
I find it quite interesting what you've said about like how he'll relate to this constituency that he's looking for. Because if you can say nothing else about Winston, it's that he doesn't suffer fools. If the base that he's looking for is basically consisting 100% of fools, how is that going to actually go when he needs to engage with them?
I mean, do you honestly believe that he believes in these guys' causes?
No. I think that tweet he put out about people can lose whatever they needed to lose if they weren't vaccinated, I think that's what he really believes, and he's walked it back to for expedience sake to get votes. I think that's who he really is.
And blamed an intern. Exactly. I think he's seen these people as a tool to get back into the house.
Well, I mean, I think the word tool is right when you're talking about Winston at the moment. Let's keep going in this conversation, see what comes up next.
That's the worst case scenario.
But what if he's right? What if there was an opportunity for Winston as the Deputy Prime Minister to have been informed 24 hours earlier rather than 24 hours later? Wouldn't it have been... I mean, that's what when I looked at it and I thought, good God, what if he is right? I don't know. I mean,
24 hours earlier than he was informed, or he says he found out, was still after the attack. And his initial tweet was a very sinister sounding implication that somehow the government was to blame for not having acted fast enough, and it was completely irresponsible. It was an outrageous tweet.
That is one interpretation. We probably won't go any further that way, but I mean, and of course Labor did, or Jacinda Ardern did, the next day say that she had been informed, the office had been informed about around about the same time the attack was happening. So what I found interesting though was the revelation this week that he made that tweet just before he had dinner with Christopher Luxon and his wife Amanda. I don't know whether you can read anything into that timing or not. It just seems curious, really.
But it's always about timing, isn't it? Everything's about timing.
It's been suggested that he did it as a bit of a flex to kind of show, look, I'm not in the box seat. I'm the smallest party that's coming into these talks. But look, I'm still Winston Peters. I can say whatever I want. I can say it with impunity. As the other party leaders,
smallest party, but the biggest focus.
Kept their mouths shut. And, and it is a bad signal if that's how he intends to behave, because you would think that somebody acting like that in government disqualifies them from any of the high offices that he wants, like foreign minister.
So this would make, well, we've had radio silence on this from Christopher Luxon and David Seymour. They must be looking at the forthcoming specials and just crossing their fingers then, wouldn't you think, Manifesto?
I think you're probably right. But who knows where it's going to go, and that's the problem. It's taken so long, and of course, the longer it goes on, people will be talking about the desirability of having Winston there as a coalition, part of the coalition government. And the fact is, there's, he is...
Should he be Deputy Prime Minister? Should David Seymour be Deputy Prime Minister, or should National keep it in-house with Nicola?
Well, he's the only one that's got the experience as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
I always say, and so many people do say, don't underestimate Winston Peters.
Okay.
Well, that's right. In the past, he has been very statesmanlike when he is actually in government. And the issue is, if he's signalling a departure from that, he was excellent in the aftermath of the Christchurch shooting. He was statesmanlike, he was responsible, he backed up the government, he really performed admirably, and it's a real shame that he's kind of muddying that legacy now.
So, completely irresponsible. That's the term that Ben used about the tweet, completely irresponsible. And I think that's probably a pretty fair summary, because and the word sinister, Chewy, that it was quite sinister. It was trying to put blame, however tacit it was, around the shooting on the Prime Minister's office, on the then government. And I say tacit because I guess for a little portion legally, I don't want to make a claim that then could be challenged, but my honest held belief, it feels like there had some sinister, as Ben said, measures to that tweet, trying to paint the government in a certain light and to absolve himself of something that's not even there. That's the other weird thing. Nothing's there for him to get blamed for. So what is it all about?
Yeah, and see, how I took that tweet is that he did know exactly who he was talking to. The people that think there are endless conspiracies around the mosque shooting, that it's a false flag, that it's a psyop, that it never happened, or that there would, just all sorts of disgusting stuff. And yeah, I don't think that Winston believes it, but I think he does know enough to weaponize it in a way that it will work for him. And I almost feel like it was a shot across Luxon's bow.
Yeah, right.
Almost. I don't know what his game is. I do agree that I think what he's doing now is just really going to tank whatever legacy that he had. I agree as well. When he was, what was he, his foreign minister? I thought he did well in that job. He got given a position that was just like, all right, I got what I wanted. Now I'm going to rein it in and do the job.
Yeah.
It was like, oh shit, okay. Awesome. Like I would want Winston Peters in a I think he'd be a hard negotiator, but in a foreign minister position, we had to go and negotiate a treaty or whatever. I reckon he'd be someone that you'd want on his side, but not at the moment. Not with the way that he's behaving now.
I don't know how his fans would actually handle him working on some kind of treaty, as you've said, Chewy. That might trigger them a little bit if that was the case. Let's say thanks to Nick with a $2 late fee there. Appreciate that, Nick. $2 late fee. Soz says kooky in it for his late fee, and also another one. Look, Doom late fee $2. Now, this is not imposed by us, just so you know.
Self-imposed. We haven't got the invoicing structure for it.
No, not entirely. But thank you for your couple of little super chats there. We appreciate you guys. I want to move on to this next story because I think this is fascinating. This will be probably the bulk of tonight's show. The guy was brought over by Free Speech Union. His name is Jonathan Sumption, Tion.
Is that a real name, by the way?
Yeah. He is a lord. Which I think is a title from the old aristocracy that gets handed down, or I don't know, something.
Jesus.
And he's been brought to New Zealand by the Free Speech Union. The thing I love about the Free Speech Union is we can say whatever the fuck we like about them, because what are they going to do? I mean, wouldn't it be hilarious if we imbued a negative vibe towards them and they had a problem with it? No, that's not what this is about. This is actually about, ironically, we're talking a bit about COVID. And I'll actually show you this. Look, you know there's a warning straight away when the YouTube clip comes up with a COVID warning on it. So this is the Q&A conversation he had over the weekend. And the first part of the conversation, they're talking about the lockdowns and what should have happened. I've got a bit of an introduction by Jack Tame, so I'll let him do it. And there's a couple of things in here. Have a think about what's said. I think there is just factually and easily provable factually wrong information coming out in this. Not big conspiracy theories. We're not going to have a debate about myocarditis. Nothing like that. Just factually incorrect information from someone with a UK perspective landing the same perspective on New Zealand. Sometimes when people commentate, there is a Northern Hemisphere bias. And they think what happens in the Northern Hemisphere is exactly the same as the Southern Hemisphere, where it can be quite different. Let's have a listen to the first part of this conversation. I think the first clip goes for a couple of minutes. And and not just factually inaccurate things, but things that are, now he's obviously a very smart man. He's a renowned historian. He's got lots of letters after his name, but I'll say some things that are said that are just plain stupid. I think a smart person can say stupid things. We'll point to that as it goes through though. Let's have a listen to part of this conversation.
In philosophical terms, a society-wide lockdowns and subsequent vaccine mandates put significant restrictions on the individual in order to collectively protect the most vulnerable, right?
So I'm actually going to stop this because I'm going to reset this up as well. So from watching this, you'll get there's two kinds of people, right, when it comes to the lockdowns. They're the kinds of people who wanted to have their lattes and haircuts free and easy, and they're the kinds of people who didn't want people to die, even though it wasn't them. It was the vulnerable people that Jack's talking about. And I'm sorry, but I think you can only be in those two camps. You either wanted the world to be open so you get your lattes and haircuts, or you accepted, as much as you hated it, for parts of the world to be locked down for a period to save people's lives. I don't see how you can be in either both of those camps or another camp. They're the only two camps you can be in. The world open, or for a time, portions of the world closed, right? And I think what you're going to find with this is Lord Sumption, if you think of it that he's one of those, I want my lattes and haircuts, what he says makes more sense. Because when he starts talking about it and Jack comes back to him talking about deaths, he kind of hand waves it away. Oh, blah, 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 blah. So think about it like that. Even if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, people in the chat, but if there's two kinds of people who want their haircuts and lattes, no matter what, or people who want people not to die, have those in your head, and we keep hearing this conversation. Jack's just talked about the lockdowns helping to protect the vulnerable.
That's essentially...
Right.
That was what we were
Could have been
sold.
done without lockdowns.
How
but
so?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, because, I mean, first of all, the problem that most countries faced was that they went from an early stage down a coercion route. And once you do that...
True. A coercion route. That's what we did. We went down a coercion route. No one's going to disagree with that. But he's saying, unfortunately, we did that. Okay, we'll keep listening.
And once you do that, it's necessarily going to be indiscriminate. You can't have a law that says we have a different rule for people over 65 to people under 65.
Here's the first stupid thing he says, right? And I'll show you the quote word for word later on. But he says, you can't have a different role or rule, I couldn't quite hear what it was depending on his accent, for people over 65 to people under 65. It's too difficult to enforce. Now that's idiocy. Because Chewy, when are you allowed to start drinking? When are you allowed to start driving? Who gets the pension? In America, who can be president? You know, you have to be at school by the time you're 6 or be in. We have rules and laws all over the place, where there are different rules for people over an age and under an age. And he's sitting there saying, you can't have that. It's too hard to enforce. Now, unless he's an absolute kind of libertarian purist and thinks all drugs should be regulated, there should be no limits to, then it's a fair point, but I don't think it is. I think he's making a stupid argument to back up a point that he's making that's full of holes. Now, before I keep going, Chewy, do you want to add anything?
No, please let him keep digging.
Okay, well, here we go.
Route. And once you do that, it's necessarily going to be indiscriminate. You can't have a law that says we have a different rule for people over 65 to people under 65.
Like the pension,
it's
for
too
example.
difficult to enforce.
Exactly over 65.
Using persuasion is a lot more sensitive to the different requirements of each type of person, and it works. We know this because the one country that defied the worldwide trend and did something different was Sweden. They had no lockdown, they didn't close schools, they didn't close restaurants or other places, they only closed major venues
this point's
like
about to be
sports
made.
stadiums. And their results were roughly comparable to the European average.
So there's the Northern Hemisphere bias. The results were roughly comparable to the European average, right? Well, you're not in Europe. You're coming to New Zealand thanks to the free speech, and you tell us why our lockups and mandates were wrong. And your example is, well, Sweden was about the same as the rest of Europe. We're not the rest of Europe. That's not what happened here. And Jack points out the death thing right now, in fact.
That's a lesson which a lot of people are determined not to learn, but it's a lesson which is really vital.
I mean, compare Sweden to New Zealand. Sweden has roughly twice the population of New Zealand, according to the WHO statistics at the moment, about 5 times as many COVID deaths.
That's quite possibly right. But
Well, hang on. There's the hand wave. What? But you know what?
Get my horse.
But in Sweden, you could get your lattes and your haircuts. That's quite possibly right. So there's 2 kinds of people. So he's demonstrating right now he's not one of those kinds of people that cares about people dying. He cares about lattes and haircuts, right? So that's the camp he's in. Because just to say that's quite possibly right is hand waving it away. There's no other possibility there.
As many COVID deaths.
That's quite possibly right. But the effect is delayed. I mean, I don't pretend to be an expert on conditions in New Zealand.
Well done. Agreed.
On the whole, in Europe, travel bans achieved almost nothing. I can well believe that, given the geographical position of New Zealand, they might have achieved rather more there. But whatever they achieved can
Get
only
on a
ever be
plane.
temporary.
Fuck off.
Sooner or later, the country has got to open up, as it now has done, and it then gets the delayed effect that it avoided at an earlier stage.
If we were to face
Right. I want to have a look at that last statement as well. And I have actually scripted it down so we can have a look at what he just said. So here's the 2 quotes that I really want to knuckle down from this first part of the conversation. So the first thing he said, as I got written up here, was there's different... Now, I don't know whether he said role or rule because of his accent, but either way, it doesn't really matter. Different role for people over 65 to people under 65. It's too difficult to enforce. Okay. So therefore, we can't stop people who are 12 driving cars. We can't stop people who are 60 getting the pension. What are you talking about? Tons of our laws are set up when we have a differentiation based on age. So of course you can have different rules based on a differentiation. Now I know COVID stuff wasn't about age, but that was the example he used. But we have tons of evidence for differentiating between people groups for enforcing laws. Age is a perfectly good example. Now, the second part of the conversation that we just played, this is what he said. At the start of it, he said, the effect is delayed. So what he's saying after Jack said, 5 times the deaths and 2 times the population, is he said the effect is delayed. Okay, so that says to me, he's saying it will happen. The effect, the deaths, are delayed. It will happen. In that last part of the conversation we played, he said this. You can only ever be temporary, the effects, can only ever be temporary. Sooner or later, the country has got to open up and it then gets the delayed effect it avoided earlier. So the delayed effect that he's comparing it to would be deaths. Because if he's saying the delayed effect with the example of Sweden, then that means the delayed effects, the deaths will catch up, which is quite plainly false. Because what happened in New Zealand with our lockdowns and our mandates and how we handled it was we gave the population time to get vaccinated. And so what has happened is the COVID cases have caught up to the rest of the world, but guess what hasn't caught up to the rest of the world? COVID deaths. That's why our COVID deaths are one of the best in the world. That's why there's reports that say the government that we had in then saved 20,000 lives. Because, the number of people catching COVID, the graph has gone up, and that's caught up to be comparable to the rest of the world. But the number of deaths hasn't followed that route. It stayed pretty much down here, and it stayed far, far less. And that's because New Zealand had the time, because of the lockdowns, because of the closed borders, to get everybody vaccinated. I'm not having that debate with anyone tonight. It is empirical data that the vaccination saved lives and the lockdown gave us time to get the population mostly vaccinated. So he's wrong. The delayed effect will be avoided because of the time we had to get vaccinated. So it's fake and false information, and I'm a smidge disappointed that that old mate Jack Tame didn't push back a bit harder on this, Joey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to see him set fire to his feet like he did to pretty much every politician in the lead up to the election. Yeah, look, I think this guy who is literally a boomer is going, well, I don't agree with the lockdown in the UK, and therefore I don't agree with lockdowns in general. Like he's just transplanting the UK experience over to us. The UK was missing several advantages that we had. We have just generally a lot more faith that our government is not out to fuck us over.
Well, we did. that might have shifted in the last 18 months.
It may have shifted a bit,
Yeah.
but I still, to this day,
Unfairly so.
even like as much as I dislike National, I don't think that they are as militantly out to get the working class as the Tory government is over in the UK. There is massive swathes of their population that have no buy-in to their central government, that have no trust in it, that second guess everything that they say based on history. It's the thing that they've learned over decades. So when the government comes out and says, we have to lock down to save lives, people didn't go, yeah, okay, this sounds reasonable and they've explained it well, I'll do as I'm told. They automatically went, fuck you, government, no way, something's up. And in the fullness of time, something was up. They were giving out contracts to their buddies. They were carving out, all sorts of loopholes for business associates. They were partying while they were telling people not to go and visit their nan and stuff like that. Their lockdown has nothing on ours. It was compromised.
Yeah.
It was just degraded to a point where it didn't work, and it just ended up to the point where they were saying, oh, we had a lockdown and it didn't work. Well, we're saying we had a lockdown, we had greater buy-in from our population, and we all bit the bullet and did it, and it fucking worked. And what that's doing is showing up a mirror to these guys and going, you could have done this, you didn't, you fools.
Yep. No, absolutely. And Mute Cat, I think, spells it out perfectly. Yeah, but Pat, old mate wanted the serfs to be there to wipe his ass, and they had to stay home.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do rambling around in a fucking estate for 2 months? You need the groundskeeper in. It's unworkable.
I just think as well, I don't have any problem someone coming to New Zealand and going, this is what we did in Europe. But what he's doing obviously is going, this is what we did in Europe. You guys should have done that here, especially like Sweden. It's like, well, no, there's a difference between you sharing your experience of what happened overseas. Fine. But then you saying that's how it should have happened here when what happened here was exponentially better than what your example is. Just fuck off. Just talk about hand wave. I'll just hand wave you away. It's ridiculous. There's a second part of this conversation I want to play. And it speaks more to the conspiracy theorist angle. He talks about what needs to be in place for a despot government to rise. I won't say too much more than that. I'll just let this part play for a minute or so. Here we go.
If lockdowns are instituted through a political process and the government of the day enjoys a mandate, is there any issue with the process side of things?
Well, not with the formal process, but the problem is, first of all, government messaging in many countries, I don't know about the position in New Zealand,
so why are you here?
Deliberately designed to induce conformity with the rules by, I think, exaggerating the nature of the problem, in particular by pretending that it affected everyone equally when it didn't.
Okay, first of all, that's not the case in New Zealand. We have evidence of that. I have evidence of that in the streets that I live in. When COVID first came out outside Otago University, it was look after your nana and pop. That's literally, there was big signs about COVID, about people staying inside, look after your nana and pop. So again, I mean, he did say, I don't know how it happened here in New Zealand, but the reality is, so what? Yeah, exactly what you said. Why are you sharing what you think is the best way? Because we were constantly told from the front what population was dying, what population it was most dangerous for, who we were protecting, the elderly and the vulnerable, and we chose for most of it, whether some people hate the later lockdowns and they thought the first lockdown was good enough, but we did it in a way that best protected those people. So I think his example that he's giving from Europe doesn't relate to New Zealand at all. Because I mean, you correct me if you think I'm wrong, Chewy, I think it was very clear from the podiums that this was worst for the elderly and safest for younger people. But of course, then the younger people were the ones that could infect the elderly. That was the other thing as well. But
yeah.
Do you think that was
fair? I think our messaging around this was phenomenal. And I think to Susie Wiles and Toby Morris for their flatten the curve cartoon. I still remember that, about the reason that we were locking down was to squash that curve down so our healthcare systems don't get smashed, to allow people to get time to get vaccinated, to just buy us time, which is something that was just, it's the advantage of being a tiny little island country miles away from anyone, is that we could buy that time. Places like Sweden didn't have that opportunity. Britain could have, I think, if they were braver, but they didn't, because they've got a horribly compromised government. But what's galling is, even they brought this guy over as an expert, right? And it's very clear he's done fuck all reading on what we did and how we did things. Like, he said that basically word for word 3 times already. Oh, well, I don't know about the New Zealand experience.
No, but I enjoy your wine.
Why are you here?
Yeah, like
Why
I said,
are you here?
if he had to come across just to tell the story of what happened in Europe, fine, no problems. But he's actively saying this was a mistake. This should have been done like this. Oh, by the way, I don't know what you did here, but it should have been done like this. So let's keep going. We've got about another minute of this to go, I think.
By pretending that it affected everyone equally when it didn't.
It didn't. We know that.
But also, the reality is that historically, every despotic regime that has ever arisen has done it through fear. And fear is the great enemy of democracy. Fear.
Yeah, we'll get to this, because so you're implying that the then government were trying to become despotic? That's what they're a despot group. That's what they were trying to do. We'll get to this at the end, Joey. But why would you mention that? You're basically saying the government of the time used fear. Every despotic government that's ever come apart started by using fear. So are you suggesting that that government was trying to become despotic at some stage? Is that what I mean, that's how I hear it, but we'll talk more about it at the end.
I will induce people voluntarily, and I accept voluntarily, to accept restrictions which, in a more balanced frame of mind, they would not accept. And that's why I think governments should be extremely careful about what they say in public. Again, Sweden was the model here. They treated people like grown-ups and not like infants who needed to be ordered around and told what to do.
So again, like, there's still another 40 seconds to play.
Crack.
Yeah, but so Sweden, this is the thing, and I think I've already said it once today about the Gallipoli thing. Sweden treated people like grown-ups, his words, and not like children being told what to do. If you spoke to all those people in Sweden whose family members died, that didn't need to die if they'd done it another way, as is evidence in New Zealand, will they be going, oh, but at least they didn't treat us like children and we got to have our haircuts and lattes? Or would they rather be saying, I wish granddad was still here, I wish dad was still here, I wish so-and-so was still here? I would have a sneaking suspicion that they'd probably be keener to see their family member than go, phew, at least they treated us like grown-ups and we got the chance to make bad decisions ourselves.
Is this one of the guys that thinks that traffic lights are just against freedom of movement or something like that? Like, how dare they tell me how to navigate an intersection? They're not treating me like an adult. They're telling me that I must go on the green man. I do not wish to go on the green man. I wish to go on the red man. But
I like
my
orange.
choice. It's like Sweden is not the UK, and the UK is not Sweden, and we are not the UK, and we are not Sweden. We all had different choices to make. The cheek of this guy coming in. Like, I remember Sweden going, oh yeah, we think we'll ride this out. We don't want to impinge on people's freedoms. Fine. That was a decision that they made, and they had to bear the consequences of those decisions. They have a unique set of laws. I think I saw someone mention in the chat, Sweden has laws about restricting people's movements in peacetime. They would have to change essentially a big chunk of their constitution to do it. The Scandi countries, they're freedom lovers, So maybe that was the choice that they had to make in the framework that they had. But I remember when people started dying and you saw people going, oh, maybe this wasn't great. It's sweeping through our old folks' homes and it's completely wrecking our economy anyway. Maybe we should have done it a different way.
Yeah.
We had the chance to work that out. Sweden didn't.
Let's get the last 40 seconds.
So what might the message have been then if we were to pursue a Sweden-like approach in other countries? What would the message
The
be?
message, for example, in the UK would have been exactly what it actually was before we introduced a lockdown. The message was, this is a serious pathogen. It is selective in the categories of people that it makes seriously ill or kills. We have got to shelter the vulnerable, people in care homes, people over a certain age, people with certain identifiable diseases. But otherwise, the object should be to maintain life as normally as possible, because that's actually the best way of keeping people sane.
And if weighing
So that's the offset. Yeah, that's the offset,
Sane.
right? Keeping people sane is seen by people as more important than keeping people healthy. Now, look, I want to acknowledge right now that for lockdowns and for all those things, there were some significant mental health issues that went with it. There were some people who struggled hugely with it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's two possibilities here. One is you actively look after, and I'll change the haircuts and lattes, but I'll say one is you actively look after everybody's mental health, and B is you actively look after everybody's physical health. And again, I don't think you can have both of them. Maybe you can try and find the best compromise between the two of them. New Zealand unquestionably went down the path of physical health being the top priority. And yeah, there were some mental health issues that came with that. I'm not saying that's okay, and I'm not hand waving that away. However, the idea that we need to isolate the vulnerable and the people of a certain age and the people who are in care homes, etc., who looks after those people? People who won't be isolating, people who won't be kept safe from COVID, people who will be out and about on a Friday night at a pub, picking stuff up. It doesn't work that way. They can't be isolated and then have no one in, near, or around them. It actually works at the start, when we didn't know a lot, at the beginning of 2020, the best way to do it, which we actually proved when we got out of the country for a while permanently, was to isolate everybody. I mean, think about that. At no point in this conversation has he said, oh, and you guys were COVID-free for 12 months when the rest of the world had it. It kind of worked. You know, it sort of did its part. And then the vaccines came, and then the restrictions lifted. Now, I do want to mention again this despot thing, right? Because I've got that as a quote as well. Let me bring it up.
Yeah. Now that was a common sort of thing about Jacinda, was that she was being a tyrant, a dictator, a despot. So straight away my ears pricked up when he said that.
So every despotic regime that has arisen has done it through fear. Now, we were talking earlier about what Winston Peters did with his tweet, and the subtle way he was laying some of the blame on the Labour government, the Prime Minister's office, as to what happened at the mosque shooting. Now, you don't say this unless you're actively saying they were attempting to be a despotic regime. Now, if that was the case, why did they remove restrictions? Why did they remove mandates? Why did they move down the path of more freedom after all those freedoms were taken away, and then allow people to get back to society? Surely a despotic regime that has arisen has done it through fear. There's another part of that, which is, and then increased and increased and increased and increased and actually become that despotic regime, which is not what happened here. So one has to wonder, Chewy, why he even brings it up.
I don't know. I know why Free Speech Union have brought him over.
Yep, go for it.
Like, because it's helpful for them to have a disruptive narrative around how our response went. There's a very vocal minority of people that have real problems with it. But we had massive buy-in from our population that it was the right thing to do. Yeah. Yes, there's criticisms around the edges. There's some criticisms about some of the messaging. You know, I saw someone mention in the chat, hey, look, it wasn't all great. Remember 2 shots for summer? You know, that was a messaging that did not age well. But it's the longer something goes on, the more chance you've got to get something wrong. You know, there was I don't remember the government saying this, so please, someone in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember in all of those lunchtime meetings where they, you know, the press conferences, where they said that the vaccines would make people immune to COVID.
Never said.
That it was more about slowing the spread.
Well,
But there was a lot of people, I think, there that assumed that it was a vaccine, so I get it and then I can't get COVID. And then when it came out that there was a booster, or that you could get COVID, it's just the symptoms weren't as bad, that they saw that as a betrayal, that I was told that I would not get COVID with this vaccine. And I can't remember anybody ever saying that.
The thing that's actually more accurate, I think, Chewy, as well, is you get people now, and if you want to see some examples of, just visit Sean Plunkett's Facebook page, who are saying things like, so you've caught COVID, got vaccinated, did you? Because the first vaccine...
That's what I mean, right?
But the first vaccine was something like 95% effective against the first round of COVID. And then COVID mutated, and each time it mutates, it gets a little bit less effective, to a point recently. Now, I know that there's a new vaccine that incorporates the latest sort of couple of strands, but up until the latest one, it basically was good to keep you out of hospital, but it pretty much wouldn't stop you getting it. But people are still saying today, well, we got told you wouldn't get COVID. And it's like, well, actually, on the first
I don't
vaccine...
remember that.
But the first vaccine against the first series of the first strain of COVID, it was pretty damn effective. And then it's got weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And it's just like the flu jab you get this year won't protect you from next year's flu. So it's a bit of a kind of a pointless conversation, to be honest. But the other thing I wanted to ask the whānau about, was what is this Free Speech Union up to with this? Because as I said at the start of the show, I'm really interested to hear about responsibility with speech. I think I've shown... look, if I'm wrong, someone show me where I'm wrong. But I think I've shown how incorrect the speaker is. I think I've demonstrated how wrong his talking points are.
Laughably so.
Now, do we accept that if we live in a country that has free speech, we need to also celebrate people spreading wrong information? Now, then it needs to be asked, why would the Free Speech Union actively want to put someone out there to spread wrong information? Remember, he is not, according to, I've only seen the Q&A, to be fair. I haven't seen his actual message to the public, wherever those speeches are. But on Q&A, he was quite clearly saying, you guys did it wrong. This is how Sweden done it. This is how everyone should have done it. That seems quite clear to me. Now, if he had just said this was the British experience, fine. But it seems to me like he's come across to say, this is how wrong you got it. And if that's correct, if anyone's seen him, I'm happy to hear what he said at his actual meetings. But if that is the case, why would the Free Speech Union be interested in bringing someone to New Zealand, sponsoring someone here, to go around sharing messages that are factually incorrect? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got the free speech to do it, but what's the Free Speech Union get out of this? About someone going around and telling people that water is dry. What's in it for them?
Disharmony?
Yeah, but I don't have an answer. And remember, I've said this for a long time. I believe the Free Speech Union to be basically a psyop for right-wing talking points. And this is what they come out with.
Well, you look at what they've done, what the groups that they have sponsored and spun up, Groundswell.
Yep.
Was again sowing disharmony between urban and rural, which I noticed an article that came out the other day that just poured fucking boiling water on that and said there is no rural urban divide in New Zealand. People understand how important our farming sector is. This artificial stoking of that has fractured the unity that we have in this country. They seem to spin up astroturf groups left, right, and centre. Their involvement with the Atlas group is incredibly concerning. They have constantly gone against our COVID response, and this just seems to be a continuation of that. And is that just an overall thing of eroding the confidence we have in our government?
I'm going to do something. I'm going to contact the Free Speech Union, because I don't know too much about the story yet, but there was a group of either Palestinians or Palestinian supporters today that set fire to the Israeli flag, I think in Queen Street. The Free Speech Union better stand up for them, because whether you think that's right, wrong, good, bad, disgusting, or whatever, if they've got a right to share their their actions of their speech in that way, I want to see if the Free Speech Union are going to put a line in the sand and say, yes, we support these people burning Israel's flag. I wonder how they'll relate to that, Chewie.
Yeah, no, I think they've been very selective all the way through their existence of whose speech they try to protect.
Yeah, and that's what I said. They feel to me, my honest held belief, that they are a psyop for right-wing talking points. For every one thing they do for, drag queen story time, they'll do 99 that happen to just fit so clearly in with, people speaking out against gender, or people speaking out against COVID, or people speaking out against Gaza. I don't know. I'm just spitballing, but that sort of thing. Warriors fan said this, and I did look it up. Sweden inflation 9.3, unemployment 7.3. Sweden is a mess at the moment. I looked up the inflation to see if I could find it. I saw it at 9.7. So that means that's going to be around about right. So does that any relation to the,
So why has Jacinda done that to Sweden?
And I noticed that you marked Chris's thing. Sweden had 2,721,000 cases and 25,000 deaths. Aotearoa 2.4 cases. Yeah. So there you go. So you can the number. That's what I'm saying. The number of cases may catch up, but the number of deaths are nowhere near.
Yep.
Are nowhere near.
Absolutely.
And that's the
look,
difference.
It's someone that works, in frontline retail. What he's asking there is for people that are not lords and barristers to keep working the shops, to keep working the service industry, to keep exposing themselves to every infected customer that comes through the door, to keep the economy going, to keep the shareholders happy.
Yep.
That's what he wants.
So
and he's going to dress that up and it's freedom. We give people freedom, and they're treating you like children.
Yeah.
Well, when mum and dad are trying to keep the kids alive, generally that's seen as good parenting.
Let's just say real quickly again, if you've just joined us, if you're watching us live, I'll just put a link in all the chats to vote for us at the New Zealand Podcast Awards, newzealandpodcastawards.com/nominate. And you need to put in a link. And because it's an audio podcast award, it's for audio podcast. This is an audio podcast as well. So I put the link to our audio podcast, which is in the description as well. And whilst
let's rattle some cages. We like that, don't we?
Yeah, let's knock a few mainstream media news organisations off the top of their perch. Whilst you're doing that and you've got that Apple podcast link, why don't you subscribe while you're there as well? All right, go on. I double dare you. Double dare you, no backsies. Let's have a look at this last story. This is a really sad story. And, I noticed, we've already mentioned him once in this show tonight, but the revolting Karen Plunkett making some kind of joke about where all those woke journalists go. People have lost jobs and losing incomes and are going to have to look for new work. So you don't have to be a complete cunt about it all the time, you pile of pancake batter. But let's have a listen to what... is that the right thing? Is he pancake batter? Is that what we're saying these days?
Yep. Poorly mixed, lumpy bubbles in it. Yeah.
All right. So this is the statement that the guys on the project gave out on Friday night.
If you're watching tonight, it's probably time for us to talk about that thing that everyone has been talking about in New Zealand over the last 24 hours. It was announced yesterday that after almost 7 years on air, there's a proposal for our show, The Project, to end for good in just a few weeks. We got the news yesterday and we took last night off. And we took the day, most of yesterday, actually, to spend some time with our team and think about all the incredible work that we've been lucky enough to do with them on this show.
Yeah, we've been really, truly blown away by the feedback we've received from you guys watching at home. Thank you for watching us and supporting us over the years. Thank you for those messages, not just for us who you know, but it means a lot to everybody that has worked really hard behind the scenes to make this all happen. So now the plan is bring you awesome shows every night for as long as we are still here. Look, you might think that we just kind of hung out and did whatever we wanted to yesterday. That's not true. We spent a lot of time thinking about some sort of big story ideas that we'd like to do as we sort of wind down towards the end of the year. One of the team members pitched, would it be good for the project's health if we all just went to a luxury spa? So we'll be bringing you that investigation.
Donuts, do they still taste good?
Yeah, so we'll have to eat all of the donuts. Puppies, should we all be given one before the Christmas comes? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't really bother me. My career's littered with with bodies of dead TV shows. So this will soon just be another corpse on Corbett Highway. We move on.
Can I just say, as a guest and friend of the show, it's always been such a joy to join the panel as a fourth. So, and you guys have done an amazing job anchoring this show over the last 7 years, and you are such positive, awesome people to be around, and the whole team's amazing. So, you know, if I was to score this project, I'd give it an A+.
I just hope Warner Brothers Discovery can forge on and get over this. Hope they survive.
We still have plenty more great shows to come before the end of the year, and then stay tuned for my OnlyFans.
There you go. That'll be the end of it. But look, I mean, there are people even in the chat here kind of going, "Oh, well, who cares? Doesn't matter." I guess from working in the industry, which I have, I think about the people around it. I mean, we saw this with Today FM, disappeared. You know, like 30 or 40 staff members are out of work. I don't know how many there are with this, but there's probably 20 people who this pays their salaries, sort of thing. And I firmly believe that whether you like the style of a news outlet or not, one less news outlet, one less place to tell New Zealand stories makes New Zealand not quite as good a place to be. Because even if you don't like who they are or what they do, other people do. Like you like us. Hi, we like you too. Other people hate us, but they might like the project. So, you know, it's a place to be informed. And if a place to be informed goes away, then I think it makes us all a little bit worse off.
I mean, I have conflicting views on the project. It's a spin-off of an Australian show. Could we not have done something ourselves? It's a very light infotainment show, whereas I wish there would be a bigger deep dive into some of the things that they talk about, that they just brush over. Like, it's a great show for a politician to come in, drop a couple of slogans and dip without really getting questioned about what he said. And it's just, you know, he's just a regular human that says that beneficiaries should be kept in camps. Anyway, on to our next story. You know, I'm not necessarily a big fan of that. However, I'm a comedian, and I know a lot of Auckland comedians that have had semi-regular gigs on that show as guests and that sort of thing. And that's an important aspect of that community, because, you know, you want to get stage time, you want to get your face out there, and that was a paying gig. And now it's gone. And now I question what is going to replace it. Is it going to fill that same hole? I have big concerns about New Zealand media. Just the legacy media organisations, I don't think are adapting to how people want to watch and consume content these days, and they're sort of scrambling around, and this sort of, oh shit, what do we do, makes for very uncertain times for people in those industries. Yeah. You know, we've experienced that of like trying to show these big legacy companies of like, hey, did you know that you could do this for a low price? And they go,
not that low, not that low though. If you're watching legacy media, we're not that cheap. We're cheap. We're not that cheap.
Well, look, we could do this professionally for the. I'm sure. What did I say? Tova O'Brien's annual coffee budget would probably do us quite well.
Look,
microphone.
I know people who have worked there and who do work there. Like we talked about Jeremy Elwood today. He used to be the, I think it was the head writer. He's not there now, but he was for a while. He ironically kicked in that gig just before COVID kicked in. And I think he looks back at that thinking, oh, that was an interesting time to go a paid gig. But I know people who still work there, and I'll identify this person. But I know someone who's, let's just say they're senior in the group. Now, whether that means they're on screen or off screen, I'm not going to say. But said to me, after it had started up, because yes, you're right, it's a spin-off of the project in Australia. Australian, the project was very successful for a long time, and then it just started to fail, and then they got rid of it over there in the last 12 to 18 months. But when it was very successful, this person that I know who works at the project now said to me, the reason this kind of program is good and it's successful in Australia and not here is because they don't have a Shortland Street. Shortland Street has huge numbers it drains all the advertising dollar and it takes all the eyeballs for 7 p.m. And so Australia doesn't have a Shortland Street. And that's why here in New Zealand, those 7 o'clock programs have always struggled. Now, that person then went in and worked on the project and is one of the people who is losing their job. But I thought it was an interesting perspective, which probably actually means it's done pretty well for itself to survive 5 years up against a Shortland Street. And I think, unfortunately, it's just going to come down to dollars and cents, and that's a pretty cruel media world. I mean, it's not as cruel as Today FM, who didn't even get given a chance to get to 5 years, but you can see when those groups do it, they're just like, we're done. I've never worked for a group that's had that pulled out from under me, but I have worked in radio where my contract wasn't renewed at the end of the year. So I get it a little bit. You kind of go, shit, what am I going to do next year? But it must be, I think about the people working in the rooms out the back that no one sees the face of. We said this about Today FM. We went, Tova will be fine. Lloyd will be fine. Look at them. Tova's on stuff and Lloyd's on TV3, I think. They are fine. You know, Corby will be fine. Jesse Mulligan works on RNZ. They'll be fine. Who won't be fine is perhaps the writer's room, or who won't be fine perhaps is the grip, if they still have grips these days, or maybe the audio people, or people who are going to have to go from a full-time job to a part-time job for Newshub because they've now only got, the news in the afternoon to do, but not the news in the afternoon and the project at night sort of thing. That's who I feel for.
Is anybody else just absolutely shook by the fact that this sort of thing it's still like, oh, we can't do anything better than Shortland Street? Come on, New Zealand. It's been decades. Is Chris Warner even still alive?
I don't know. And look, to be honest,
I don't know.
To be honest, me saying that was a conversation from about 4 years ago. So I don't even know if Shortland Street is still the behemoth that it once was, but certainly of the era, it was dominant in that 7 p.m. time slot for so very, very long. Hey, we missed a super chat. Let me just put this out there as well, because we want to say thanks to JC for the $10. Talking about Lord Sumption, he speaks in a soft and unemotional tone, and he's wearing a tie. He must know what he's talking about. It's a very fair point. I think. And
chat has just confirmed that Chris Warner is still alive. So that's some
Shortland Street watchers.
That's amazing.
Well, some of us have been on Shortland Street a few times. Three times.
Yeah, we get it, Pat. You lived in Auckland.
Three different characters. I had to act across. From Chris Warner. I don't know what his real name was with one of the characters. I played a homeless guy. A homeless guy who got blamed. We've got some older people in the audience, and they may remember the storyline. There was a rapist who was around the Shortland Street area, and I had to play the role of a homeless guy who was a bit dim, so there was no character acting going on here. That got blamed for it.
Rough.
And at one stage, I had a scene with Chris Warner, and I had to talk to him at his car and ask for some money off him. And as a joke, he pulled a real $20 out of his pocket and gave it to me, and I did give it back. I did. I didn't keep it. So yes, no, I didn't have a beard at that time, Emma.
We need to put that in the credit to this show somehow.
I've actually got one of the episodes.
Homeless rapist.
I've got one of my. I played another part. I played Merv, the security guard. After that, I had a named role. That homeless guy wasn't a named role, but I had a named role. So I'm Merv, the security guard. And I've got one of those episodes somewhere in the house, and the kids have never found it, and I think I might burn it, or I might put it somewhere like in a vault for when I die they can get it out and laugh at it. So, all right. Thank you for being involved tonight. I'm going to push a little bit this podcast award thing for the next few weeks, because we actually do want to give the mainstream media a scare. Like, honestly, we do. And I've told you that this week we'll give you some more information or some more ideas about what's happening next year. That will be a conversation we have this week. It probably won't be a final conversation, but we'll give you some more information towards the end of the week on that. And one of the things we want to do is, whatever we end up doing with this BHN thing, is we want to be able to look at the mainstream media and go, you guys need to start listening to how this is done properly. That sounds really arrogant, but when I talk to mainstream media, they don't know what they're doing in the digital world. They really don't. They're basically doing television on the internet, or they're doing radio on the internet, or they're doing newspapers on the internet. They're not developing their own digital product. And so, if we can give them a fright, then that'll do nothing but help us open doors for 2024. So I'm not going to put them up again. All the links. Oh, Michael Galvin, that's his name. Yeah, thanks, DIY. Put all the links in the description already. Head on there. And remember, you got to use a link to the podcast and use one of the audio links. So either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I've got the Apple Podcast link in there and you can check it out. And actually, speaking of the Apple Podcast, I'm really sorry. No one messaged me, but I think I uploaded last Thursday night's episode and then I never hit next. I never hit send. So I think I only just uploaded it tonight when I got into the system and saw it was sitting there. So I really apologise about that. I must have just been a bit of a brain fart.
Oh, that explains a couple of messages I got on Mastodon. I could have probably let you know about that.
You should have let me know about that. I apologise about that, guys. So in other words, there's a brand new episode up from last Thursday and there'll be another brand new episode up in about an hour. So I apologise. That was my bad. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, if you're listening right now and you miss one and there's no explanation for it, just message us on Twitter or something. And I've done it twice in about, I think we've done 4.3 million episodes now. I've done it twice that for some reason I didn't push the last schedule. I just pushed next, and then shut the computer down. All right, guys, that's us. Remember, if you want to support what we're doing as well, you can, and if you've got like cash in your pocket rather than just voting for us, you can head to bhnshop.nz. A big thanks to Gary, who's bought a top tonight. We have got these bottom feeder shirts only available until this Thursday, and then they'll be gone forever. BHN merch is there as well. And other than that, I think we are... we're pretty good to go. I think we're done, Burger, Chewy.
Yep. Sounds really good.
bighshop.nz. We will catch you guys tomorrow. Oh, now, Wednesday night, I'm probably not here. One of my children has got their final day at school and they're doing their prize giving and she's won a whole bunch of awards in music and drama and that sort of thing. So, yeah, so I definitely want to get there. So there's a very good chance I won't be here on Wednesday night. Whether Chewy does his own live show, whether we do a pre-record, I don't know. We'll figure that out, but just a heads up. For that, I'd say 85% chance I won't be here on Wednesday night, but we'll tell you more about that tomorrow night. All right, team, love you to bits, all the best, and we will catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.